All right. Good evening, everyone. Let's start. Good evening and welcome to an evening in our book launching series. Before we begin, I would just like to remind everyone to please make sure your microphones remain closed throughout the evening. We will allow time for questions and comments at the end, or you are more than welcome to write them over the chat. This session, as you can see, is being recorded, and we will upload it probably just next week, seeing that we're already in the weekend, to our website and on our YouTube channel. I will post those links on the chat when I finish speaking. So now, with no further ado, I'm pleased to invite Dr. Olga Golden, the Director of the Libraries and Information System at Bar-Ilan, to open and host our evening. I hope you all enjoy.
Okay, good evening to all our guests and friends. I'm happy to welcome you to our virtual salon. We continue now our meetings in a series of launches of books written by researchers of Bar-Ilan University. And today I'm so glad to present the book of Dr. Alan Dershowitz, We Never Expected, a comparative study of failures in national and business intelligence. Please, Professor Wright. Professor Wright? Oh. I think we have a problem. Professor Wright was here.
Sorry.
Okay.
Sorry,
okay.
Here I am. I forgot to turn everything on.
Okay.
Sorry, I'm with you now.
Yes.
So I started saying that I prepared my my notes in Hebrew, but I'll translate as I go along. I think we'll be okay. So good evening to everyone, and I'm really pleased and honored to greet this important event in honor of the publication of the book of Dr. Alan Dershowitz, who is a lecturer here in our Department of Information Science, and also a research fellow at the National Security Studies Center in Haifa University. The book that we are celebrating today is called We Never Expected That, a Comparative Study of Failures in National and Business Intelligence, and it was published by Lexington Books. In this book, Dr. Barnea is comparing between two types of intelligence, state intelligence and business intelligence. And these are two fields that were considered in the research as two separate fields with different outlooks, different approaches and methodologies, and with different people were involved in them. And whereas Dr. Barnea is calling upon us to learn from them together, and in a way that business intelligence will learn from national intelligence, and national intelligence will learn from business intelligence. And in the book, Dr. Barnea is analyzing various cases where countries or companies were completely surprised by developments that they did not foresee. And as a result of that, they almost led them to collapse. And in some cases, actual collapse, such as in the case of the financial crisis of 2008, that brought about the collapse of the big financial bank, Lehman Brothers. And another example that is discussed in the book of almost collapse is of the IBM company, which did not foresee the huge changes in the market in which it was acting, and it almost reached bankruptcy. And one could also, of course, mention the example of the Kodak company, which had a quite similar fate. So I will leave it to Dr. Kahana to review the book and to people who are more expert than me in this field to share their evaluation of the book. And instead, what I want to do in the 2 minutes I have left is to ask a few questions which concern me as a part of the administration of this university, of Bar-Ilan University, and concerns actually anybody who is involved in academic administration of universities and colleges in these day and age. And the questions are we also perhaps likely to experience surprises that might put into peril our continued existence, our continued functioning of the universities in Israel as we know them today? For instance, this rapid transition to distant learning and to digital learning, which was accelerated as a result of the COVID crisis, will it bring about a situation where Israeli students will ask themselves, if I can study from home, why should I study in Bar-Ilan University in Israel and not perhaps in Harvard University or MIT in the United States? Or why should I bother of driving all the way from my home to the campus in order to hear the lectures if I can stay at home and learn from there, study from there, and even taking my exams from there? Is the meaning of these developments that Israeli universities need to cut down on the number of buildings that they have, the number of lecture halls that they have, and to rely more on distant learning? Do we have to look for new audiences of students, not just in Israel, but all over the globe, if we want to remain relevant? And another question, is what we are teaching these days and the way that we are teaching, is it still relevant to the time and age in which we are living and to the way our students are thinking and acting and engaging? Or perhaps we are still stuck in concepts from the past which are no longer relevant regarding what should be taught in university and how it should be done. Is the conservatism in these fields, which is very much one of the characteristics of academia, will it not be a source of calamity for us? Are we putting enough resources into finding intelligence about what we should expect and what our competitors in Israel and abroad are doing, so that we will not find ourselves with these surprises, very unpleasant surprises, whether they are concentrated surprises or diffused surprises, to use the terminology coined by Dr. Barnea. Now, I will leave these questions in the air because they are really a topic of a different conference, but they are definitely questions which came to my mind as I was reading about the book, that today we are celebrating its publications. So I wish you all and us all a very interesting and fruitful conference. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Wright. Very interesting readings, not usual. Lots of questions. Maybe we will hear today one or two answers. Let's see. And now I would like to invite Dr. Ephraim Kahana to talk us about the book. Dr. Ephraim Kahana holds a PhD in international relations. He taught international relations and national security in National Security College in Israel. He chaired the Department of Political Science and the National Security Program in the Western Galilee College in Akko. Dr. Kahana has published numerous papers and books in the field of intelligence and national security. Dr. Kahana, the stage is yours, please.
Just open, please, Dr. Kahana, open your microphone. We can't hear you.
Okay, now you can hear me? Good.
Yes, yes, thank you.
Okay, good evening, everyone. Thank you for inviting me to this very important event. It is a great honor and pleasure to present and talk about Dr. Avenir Barnea new book. The book title is We Didn't Anticipate That, or We Never Expected That, a comparative study of failures in national and business intelligence. The book published by Lexington Press, and I recommend everyone who is interested in intelligence studies, even practitioners and scholars, to read it. Avenir succeeded in his book to show the similarities and the differences between national security intelligence on one end and the business competitive intelligence on the other end. Furthermore, not less important, Avenir coined two new terms that are relevant and useful in dealing with surprises. The new terms are concentrated surprise and diffuse surprise. To illustrate the terms, Barnea analyzed 4 case studies. 2 of them belong to the field of national security, and 2 others belong to the field of competitive intelligence. The first intifada, the Palestinian uprising, started in 1987, may be considered, according to Avenir, as a diffused surprise. It broke out as a spontaneous civil uprising, and many of the pieces of information collected before the Intifada were contradictory. Therefore, it is a diffuse surprise. The second surprise, the second surprise in the field of national security is the 9/11 attack, which can be considered a case of concentrated surprise. All of the pieces of the information were in the same vector. The 9/11 surprise was not out of the blue. Rather, it was a problem of connecting the dots and sharing intelligence among the US intelligence agencies. The others surprises related to business competitive intelligence are the near collapse of IBM in 1993. This was a concentrated surprise. All of the pieces of information were on the same vector. And accordingly, the hardware industry was going to be changed dramatically. IBM management ignored this information, while their competitors, Dell, Compaq, you mentioned their Compaq in the book. By the way, Compaq has disappeared. IBM still exists. And HP all read exactly the map of the changing of the hardware industry and got prepared for the new age of PC instead of the big computers. Therefore, this kind of surprise can be considered, according to you, Avenir, as a concentrated surprise. The other case study in the field of business competitive as was mentioned before, is the collapse of the Lehman Brothers Bank during the financial crisis of 2008. Many of the pieces of information about the crisis were often contradictory. The collapse of Lehman Brothers Bank is considered a diffuse surprise. Besides these 4 case studies, Aבנר refers in his book to many other cases. The Arab Spring. The Arab Spring can be also be considered as a diffuse surprise. I remember that the director of the military intelligence those days, Aviv Kochavi, said in October 2010, in the coming year, we do not anticipate any change in the Egyptian regime. 2 months after, the regime has been changed. Besides dealing with the 4 cases, you mentioned many other cases, Polaroid, Compact. I think that each of these cases may be and were to be studied and dealt separately, in maybe in a different paper, or new paper, or a new book. Every one of them, every of these cases is interesting and relevant to the study of surprises. One important point that should be mentioned is that the business sector is sharing internally among its various units. The national intelligence, sharing intelligence among the agencies in the USA, for example, was not implemented at least until the reforms recommended by the 9/11 Inquiry Commission. The main conclusion, and to conclude is a very magic word, and I don't refer to this audience. When I say to conclude, even the sleeping audience is suddenly wake up. So to conclude, there are many parallels and similarities between national security intelligence and competitive business intelligence. Anyone who is interested in national intelligence can learn from the business intelligence and vice versa. Aבנר books is a significant contribution to the studies of intelligence, both by students, scholars, and practitioners from both disciplines, from the national security discipline and from the business competitive intelligence discipline. In my view, it should be added, the book should be added as a reading in every syllabus engaging in intelligence studies. And we have a lot of work to publish more papers, many other case studies that require research and investigation. Good luck, Aבנר.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kahana, for your very interesting talk. And now let us move to a virtual round table discussion. Our chairwoman today is Professor Jenny Bronstein, the head of the Information Science Department of the Faculty of Humanities at Bar-Ilan University. Dear Professor Bronstein, please.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for inviting me to chair the panel and to honor our esteemed colleague, Dr. Bernaia. I would like to propose 3 questions to the panelists, which I'll present shortly. And following Professor Wright's question of the academia, I would like to propose another perspective And I would like you to talk, please, about, discuss the study of intelligence in the academia, the different programs, and why are these programs important? How can they contribute to the development of the field of intelligence that we know is very important for all kinds of organizations and institutions? And how can government agencies cooperate with the academia on this matter? Our first panelist is Dr. Barry Sulaouf, who is currently the Rekanati Kaplan Intelligence Fellow at Harvard University. He previously was the Chief of Solutions in the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, serving concurrently as the Executive Secretary of the National Intelligence Analysis Board and as the Intelligence Community Analytic Ombudsman. He is a member of the Senior National Intelligence Service. Please, Dr. Sulaouf, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much for allowing me to join this august group of experts. I do want to make clear, I'm speaking on my private capacity. I'm on loan right now to Harvard University. I'm not speaking officially on behalf of the US government. But I'm not going to say anything that they wouldn't want me to say anyway. I'm required to say that legally. Aבנר, it's great to see you again virtually. We've been friends and colleagues for a long time, and I think this is a great book that you've put out. It's something that can contribute. One of the previous speakers said it should be used in classes. I agree. I think this is a valuable contribution to teaching intelligence education. I do want to start by saying that when I was beginning in the 1970s, a long time ago, there were no academic courses, at least not that I was aware of, that taught intelligence in the outside world. It was possible to take a course on national security or foreign policy or something and have a few words about intelligence, but it really was not taught in academia 35 years ago. Where we have come now is that there are a large number of academic institutions out there that teach not only national intelligence, mostly what I'm going to talk about today, but also, as Aבנер's book touched on, what we call competitive intelligence or business intelligence, and explains the commonalities that exist in the intelligence analysis function, whether it's business intelligence, law enforcement intelligence, national security intelligence. It's much the same thing. There are hundreds of programs that exist around the world, many of them in the United States, increasing number of them in what I will refer to anachronistically as the free world, that focus on the use of intelligence analysis. There are hundreds of these programs. What used to teach and still do teach at one of the flagship programs back in the 1990s at Mercyhurst University in Erie, Pennsylvania. That started as an on-campus physical program only, and then over the years, it's now transitioned to the point where the entire program is available online. It's possible to get a complete master's degree without ever setting foot on the campus of Erie, Pennsylvania. That cuts both ways. Not every student has to come to Erie, Pennsylvania in order to take the courses. They can do them online. They get basically the same content, but the return on investment is interesting. You know, what's to make you choose a particular college if you can do the studying at home? So the challenge is to make sure that the content that's available online or in the classroom is identical. From that flagship institution, now we have relatively new programs. Another program that I teach in at Georgetown University, it's the master's program in applied intelligence. If any of you don't know the program, just use your open source intelligence skills, Georgetown and applied intelligence, and you'll find the program. This one was designed to be, from the very beginning, online, in the classroom and a hybrid, a mix of both, based in the city of Washington, D.C., and intended to be for the purpose of helping people who are already in the intelligence community as professionals improve their game. And that's who most of the students are. And that's done by having a very particular form of faculty, not just academics, but people who are practitioners, that is, people who have spent their careers in the intelligence community or in military intelligence and have retired, or in some cases, like me, who have not yet retired and are able to speak in both worlds. I think that's the key to a successful intelligence education program, to have a proper mix of academics, people who can do the theoretical work in international relations or security affairs, and people who have had practical experience and being able to combine those in the classroom. One of the other roles that I have is as the president of the International Association for Intelligence Education. Some of you remembers, IAFIE. If you want to look at the website, it's IAFIE.org. And let me see if I can share my screen. I'll put some email addresses up there for you while I talk a little bit about IAFIE. Let's see. I don't seem to be able to do that. Hang on.
You should be able to share your screen. There's a little green arrow at the bottom. You see it on
at the very center bottom of the screen.
There we go.
Okay, that's my email. You don't need to see that, but that's okay. Hang on, I'll find it here. So I'll locate this. What I'm looking for is a PowerPoint that has email addresses. So if anyone's interested, you can contact me or other members of the board to be able to talk to you about the opportunities that IAFIE has to share. While I'm doing that, let me tell you, there's hundreds of us from all around the world, from Israel to Australia, from Canada to South Africa. And we have intelligence professors. We have trainers from government. There we go. Can you see that now?
Yes.
Okay. We have government trainers. We have academics. We have people in private industry who teach about business intelligence, or in some cases, law enforcement intelligence. And we have students from around the globe. We have inexpensive packages for students to be able to join. And the idea is to get them hooked on professional intelligence education from the beginning, so that when they're done being students and they go off to their careers, they can continue to take advantage of the connections of IAFIE. So then here, just for anyone's information, are the various email addresses. I'm there as the president. We have another American. It's not always an American, but the vice president right now is also an American. Patrick Walsh is an Australian. He's our international vice president, and we have a support staff at the bottom. So again, the address is iafie.org if anyone's interested. I'll leave these up on the screen for a little bit. And I think Naomi puts this full slide deck into the chat if anyone wants to take a look at that. I don't want to make this whole thing a commercial about IAFIE, but to mention that we exist for the purpose of what we're talking about today, sharing best practices in intelligence education. We are academics and practitioners. We have an international. We do have an international presence. We have had conferences around the world. The next one that's coming up is in Treviso, Italy, just outside of Venice. That's the 19th through the 22nd of June. There's information on our website, iafie.org. If you're interested in that, it's a wonderful facility. The Italian government is cooperating with us on setting up a great presence there. What IAFI does as an organization, and what all of us as intelligence professionals should be doing, is sharing our best practices, sharing curriculum, swapping syllabi, advancing books like Alan has just written to be able to make the practice of teaching intelligence better. There are programs, and I won't say which ones they are. I won't say it publicly, but if someone wants to ask me privately, I'll tell you which ones they are, that call themselves intelligence education programs, but they're not really very good. They don't have practitioners. They don't have content. Really, all they do is they download a little bit of material from the public websites that intelligence agencies have, and they talk about intelligence history, which is fine as far as it goes. That's good. But to actually make people who can go on to be professionals to work in the field, the content of those courses needs to be kept fresh, needs to be kept updated. And as another speaker also mentioned, that requires a close contact with the government customers, whether in the United States, it's the intelligence community, or in the various parts of the government agencies or military intelligence agencies in Israel or elsewhere in the world. So let me tell you a little bit about some of the changing trends that the US intelligence community is focusing on, in some ways that we have tried to modify coursework in order to keep up with it. For the past 20 years, the intelligence community has been focusing very much on counterterrorism. So there's lots and lots of academic courses that are available on how to do counterterrorism intelligence. We still have those, they're still important, but they're not as important anymore. We are adding to those, and in some cases going back to the future, resuscitating courses that we used to have 20 years ago and making them more modern, that focus on great power competition. Some people have not forgotten about the Russians over time, but maybe we in the United States have a little bit. So we're trying to refocus our ability to understand the Russian threat and focus on the Chinese threat. So building new courses, refreshing them in this modern 21st century context for how to deal with threats that come from other nation states. Artificial intelligence is something that needs to be understood in the intelligence context, using artificial intelligence for the purposes that it's best at: gathering information, storing information, retrieving information, doing calculations, doing mind-numbingly repetitive tasks that humans can do, but it's boring and we're not very good at it. Machines are better at that, processing the information and saving thereby intelligence analysts' time for the things that they do best, and that is insightful and creative and innovative thinking. If I, as an intelligence analyst, have to spend most of my day just obtaining information and processing it and moving it around, I don't have the ability to think creatively. So artificial intelligence and its cousin, which is big data analytics, helps intelligence analysts do that. And the knowledge base that's available on those two areas of technology is moving quicker than governments can often catch up to. And I think it's the role of intelligence education programs around the world to be able to provide up-to-date training somewhat, but also education on how to use artificial intelligence and data analytics.
Dr. Sulaouf, 5 more minutes.
Yeah, I'll be done in less than that.
Thank you.
I'll be done in less than
Thank you.
Avenir's book talks about competitive intelligence, how it's important for competitive intelligence to be done in a comparative sense. A lot of the practices are similar. Learning from intelligence failures in the classroom, as this book focuses on, is also important. We can talk about in a classroom how intelligence ought to be done, but my view is that we can learn better from the mistakes that we've made in the past, provided we have an open mind and focus on how that works going forward. So let me come to a close with two more comments. What we need to be thinking of doing in intelligence education programs around the world is building a pipeline to enable the best students to be able to move as quickly as possible from our classrooms into the workforce, whether that's doing competitive intelligence for business or whether that's doing national security analysis for governments. And the best way that we can do that is by keeping up to date with changing needs and changing skills, and being in touch on a daily basis sometimes with our customers about what their needs are. If we have these up-to-date programs that constantly improve themselves and do more than just teach the history of intelligence, which again, that's good to do, but that's not enough, then we'll be able to make ourselves relevant. And it kind of sets us apart a little bit from other educational programs, because we have to have that focus on who our customers are going to be in terms of who's going to be hiring our students. Let me stop there. And I don't know if we're doing questions, or we'll do those at the end.
Thank you, Dr. Sulaouf. Can you stop? Thank you. Are we doing questions? I think we're doing the questions at the end of the panel. We brought things down. Thank you. Thank you for your interesting comments, and thank you for bringing this important association to light. Our next panel speaker is Professor Shlomo Shapiro, who is the director of the Europa Institute of Bar-Ilan University, Department of Political Studies, and chairman of the International Intelligence History Association. As one of the pioneers of intelligence studies, he has been researching and teaching intelligence studies for over 25 years. Professor Shapiro, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Professor Bronstein. And thank you very much, Avner, for inviting me to this event today. I think we're kind of at the very back end of the corona, hopefully. And so we're still not at the university or in a hall together, but it's nice to see so many friends and people I know, and I see them here. So good evening to everyone. And thank you very much, Barry, for your opening statement. I was very honored to receive the Lifetime Award by IEFI's European chapter 4 years ago. It was certainly one of the highlights of my professional career. And I was very moved by that. I should also mention that Bar-Ilan University, who's not only hosting this event, but where our colleague Avner is working, is the first university in Israel to open a master's program in intelligence and military studies, which I opened together with my colleague Ephraim Lapid 7 years ago when I was head of the political studies department. And so we say in Hebrew, after 2,000 years of diaspora and 65 years of independence, Israel also has its own master's in intelligence studies. We started with 10 students, and with a lot of skepticism on behalf of many people at the university. Today, I think we have somewhere between 65 and 75 students, and I have seen already the numbers for next year's enlistment, and they look great. Over the past 30 years that I'm dealing with intelligence studies, I am often asked two questions. The first question is, how can you study something which is inherently secret? And the second question is, what are intelligence studies and where do they fit? And it's difficult to answer both of them. I remember I started studying intelligence studies back at Salford University in Britain back in 1993. Was the first program in Britain, and nobody knew what intelligence studies were or where they were supposed to be or what they were. Today, as Barry mentioned, there are hundreds of programs, and this is probably one of the fastest growing fields of academic endeavor overall. How can you study something which is inherently secret is a routine question by students, but we have to remember that intelligence as such is not secret, nor should it be, certainly not in a democracy. Of course, the tactical details, the means and methods are secret, but not the strategic issues. They must be studied, analyzed, and indeed debated. And where are intelligence studies? Where do they fit? Well, we usually say that intelligence studies fill the mission of illuminating the missing dimension in international relations. So it's everywhere in international relations and political studies. It's certainly part of history. It's part of political analysis. It's part of conflict resolution and conflict management. And it belongs to so many different disciplines, which is what makes it a discipline in itself. I want to say a few words about the IIHA, the International Intelligence History Association, which I have the honor to chair at the moment. And this was founded back in 1994. So it's the oldest professional association dealing with intelligence studies, focusing on history, whereas the FE focuses on education and teaching. We're not competing with each other. I think we're all helping each other. And the association, we're also publishing the Journal of Intelligence History, which has reached a huge distribution in recent years, and have had annual conferences all over the world. People in 5 continents. We see every year the growth of intelligence studies, which makes me very happy. It's not only a luxury. I think it's something which is more than a necessity, and I'll get to that in a minute. Avner's book examines failures of national and business intelligence, and today is a good day, or indeed perhaps a sad day, to talk about such failures because of the war in the Ukraine and what that shows us in terms of intelligence. And a very, very clear early conclusion is that Western intelligence services failed to learn anything from the corona pandemic crisis. They failed to provide early warning from low probability, high impact crises and threats. What do I mean by that? If I would have come to you 3 years ago and I would have said, listen, in 1 year, there's going to be a global pandemic, millions are going to die, world tourism is going to collapse, countries will be shut down, and you will have to stay at home for months on end. You would probably have sent me to a lunatic asylum. Very, very probable. But it was such a low probability that nobody thought it will happen. It could happen, but it won't. And everyone was explaining to us why it won't. Well, it actually happened. And this very low probability crisis had a very, very high impact. The same happened 2 weeks ago in the Ukraine. In the months and weeks coming up to the Russian invasion of the Ukraine, we saw Western intelligence officials falling over themselves to assure everyone that Putin is not going to invade. They had wonderful reasons why not. He's logical and he's doing brinkmanship and he will move all the way to the end. And it's only it's only an exercise. Well, we heard the word exercise, it echoes back in October 73 for those of us who remember. But intelligence officials were absolutely certain Putin is not going to do the invasion because it was not logical, because it didn't fit with the pattern of what they were working with for decades on end. And of course, in the coming months, we will be inundated with intelligence officials claiming that they actually did warn over the Ukraine. Well, maybe they did and maybe they didn't. But if they did, they certainly did not shout loud enough. With the world being closer to a nuclear exchange at any time since 1962, since the Cuban Missile Crisis, the voice of intelligence before the outbreak of the Ukraine war was sadly muted. And that is why books like Avner's, developing and enhancing models for prediction and early warning, are so important. And that is why the interaction between intelligence and academia is so important, because only us can sit here and say these things. Now, Barry said at the beginning of his speech, he doesn't represent any views of the US government, neither do I. But I'm afraid, Barry, I may say things they wouldn't like very much. The principal aim of intelligence, and let's not forget this, is to provide early warning. Discovering secrets is only part of it. Of course, it's a sexy part. It's an interesting, it's a challenging part. Discover secrets of the other side, but it's only part of the entire picture. And recent history is full of strategic surprises, which are national intelligence failures. We just have to mention Pearl Harbor and Operation Barbarossa. And let's not forget the previous 2 Soviet invasions were intelligence failures in the West, namely the invasion of Czechoslovakia in 1968 and the invasion of Afghanistan in 1979. In fact, officials were assuring the US government in 79 that there was no way the Soviets were going to invade Afghanistan because it wasn't logical, because they wouldn't win, because they had this and because they had that. Well, we know what happened in history. And of course, our own Yom Kippur War, 1973, a total intelligence disaster, but also for our enemies. For example, for Syria, the strategic surprise of the 2007 Israeli attack on the Deir al-Zur nuclear reactor, which basically changed the pattern of relations between the 2 countries militarily. The intelligence cycle is made up of 4 processes. It's got different names and different charts and different ways of writing this, but it's basically 4 processes, no matter how you call them. Collection, which means to collect information. Analysis, which means to understand what you collected. Forecasting, which means to say what will happen in the future, to risk your neck out and forecast the future. And dissemination, making sure that the information gets to the right people. But the question is, my question is, are we losing the human element? There is so much technology involved today in intelligence, so many thousands of people involved in the intelligence process. Technology is very good at providing facts, but not interpretation. And interpretation are all about intentions. The best example of this trend today is the numbers game. How many troops do the Russians have? How many tanks do the Russians have? How many Ukrainian forces have? Well, we've seen the charts. The Ukrainians have 200, and then the Russians have 900,000 or whatever. Does it matter? Does it matter at all? Let's not forget that the North Vietnam Taliban had no planes, they had no tanks, but they have a lot of motivation and the willingness to undertake risks, and they won the day. In the US intelligence community, there has been for decades the argument between facts and intentions intelligence. It goes back also to the old Kent versus Kendall debate of the interaction between intelligence and decision makers. But are we losing the human touch? Intelligence is becoming such a huge machinery. It's not anymore up to people to make predictions and decisions. They become part of this huge, huge system. And I'm afraid we'll be debating that long after the war. The sad situation in the Ukraine has come to some sort of bearable conclusion, which hopefully will come soon. I hope that Avner will continue his research and will continue his research endeavors and produce more such important analyses. This is certainly just the first book from a long line of books Avner is planning. I hope I'm not telling any secrets, spilling the beans here. Avner, we've set you here a big challenge, and good luck, and thank you to you, Avner. A big day and a happy day to you and your family, and thanks to everybody.
Thank you very much, Professor Shapiro, and thank you for highlighting the importance of teaching people to think outside the box and not getting fixed on it's not going to happen, it's not logical trends of thoughts. Our next speaker is Dr. Ephraim Lapid, who is a Brigadier General Reserve in the Army. Dr. Ephraim Lapid is the Vice Chairman of the Europa Institute at Bar-Ilan University. He served as a Senior Intelligence Officer in the Israel Defense Forces and was the IDF spokesperson and instructor in the Israeli National Defense College. Please, Dr. Ephraim Lapid.
Thank you very much. Good evening. Thank you very much, all of you, especially the staff of the university who initiated this forum to congratulate and to encourage the new book of Dr. Alan Dershowitz. As due diligence, I must say that he is my good friend and we share a very similar background. We both were in the as practitioners in the intelligence. He was in one organization, I was in another organization, and after many years of national intelligence, we moved with different channels of moving, but we moved to the academy, and I think that the model of Aבנר, I can call him here Aבנר, is a very good model from my point of view to see a set of people, especially in the Israeli society, people that in the last, especially in the last 2 decades, joined the academy with a motivation to share not only their knowledge, but their motivation to bring others to understand the challenges of intelligence. What Aבנר made in his book here is the comparison and study lessons of cases from the national intelligence to business, as he was also a public chair of the Association of Competitive Intelligence. So to bring the personal experience, the personal professional experience from one method to another, I think it's a very important contribution. One of the most severe, and if you want also very sensitive aspects in this sphere, in this field of intelligence, is early warning with the contradictory factor of surprise. The efforts that the state intelligence invests in order to improve the ability of early warning is, on one hand, a long-term operation, and on the other hand, the surprises that we felt. When I say we, I think that all, really all intelligence organizations in the world felt the surprise as a factor that we don't have a very effective answer how to avoid it. Now, one of the aspects of this forum this evening is to see the contribution of the academy to intelligence. I really say to intelligence, and not only to intelligence teaching, but also to the intelligence research. In Israel, we heard before about the international map of intelligence studies. In Israel, I can say that also in the last 2 decades, there is a trend in the intelligence community to open eyes, to open ears, to open minds to academy. There is also a very important institute in the Israeli Intelligence Heritage and Commemoration Center near Tel Aviv. And there are very important articles written as research of people who still are in the different Israeli intelligence community organizations, from Mossad, from the military intelligence, from Shabak. It's important to see a phenomenon that we could not see such a phenomenon 30 or 40 years ago. The aspect that Professor Spiro raised about the secrecy, how can we study, how can we research, how can we deal with intelligence in the open spaces. I in many opportunities, I raise again and again that people who say immediately when they have to talk about intelligence, this I cannot say, this I cannot deal with, and so on. From my point of view, this is a weakness. It's a sign of weakness, not because I'm ready to discuss every aspect of methodology of intelligence without any problem. What I don't want to share, I as an intelligence officer, I will not share. But there is no limit, really no limit to share methodology of cases. If I give you an example, an international example that we shared, and I can show the comparison between the past and the present. In 1973, the big failure of surprise that we we faced in the Israeli intelligence. I was at that time in office, and we had a very sensitive information about the takeout of families of Soviet experts from Syria back home. And we did not know the reason. We hesitated, either it about the big exercise or either about a potential war. This sensitive information was not published to all the functions that should need such an information, because it was from a sensitive source. I discussed many years afterwards, if anyone gets such an information about the option of families, we speak about hundreds of people, the potential source of such information can be in a big variety of sources. And the problemacy is that it was done by people who were in the business. While in the academy, when the same people moved to academy, when they dealt with information from this type, they behaved differently. And I see the model of Avner Barnea, and I see many friends who joined from the as practitioners from the intelligence to the academy. And we do, I say we, because I was with Professor Spiro in the new initiative 7 years ago to open intelligence studies in Bar-Ilan University. It was, and it is, and it will be a very important success. First of all, for the academy, I think that to have a discipline which is still not an independent discipline, but is a sub-discipline in political science, and we don't have the time to discuss, but I can share with you many forums that we had in the last years. Maybe that we faced the same tendency like political science and like communication and like a few other disciplines in the academy that started as I say a sub-academic independent discipline and moved afterward to be independent. I think that the formal status is in secondary priority. The first priority is to have good people, from my point of view, good people from academic experience and from practitioners who joined the academy. I think that this mix can be very fruitful, first of all, for the academy, and second, directly also to improve the capabilities of the intelligence, because after all, intelligence with all the technologies is based on people. And people who are more open-minded, more experienced, and more share information and knowledge with others, what we do in the academy, I think can improve also the intelligence, both the national intelligence and the competitive intelligence. I conclude once again to congratulate Aבנר for his new book, to see such a book as a good model to discuss in many forums. I must say once again that the intifada, which is raised here very widely in the book in 1987, I was at that time a member of the General Headquarters of Israel, and when I read what Aבנר wrote, many aspects were not in our mind at that time, and the contribution is to see things with different perspective in a few years afterwards, and that's the benefit of such a book. So congratulations, and thank you for the initiative of this evening forum.
Thank you, Dr. Ephraim, for your contribution. We have time for a few questions. Olga, how much time do we have? How many questions?
I think we have several questions already at our chat. Okay, so
yes.
I think we have 5 minutes, 5-7 minutes more. Okay.
Okay, so let me scroll up and try to see.
The first question was, I think, to our Vice Rector, Professor Reich.
Yes, let me find. Okay, yes. A question for Professor Reich. Are students or employers more concerned that the university lecturer in the lecture room is ailing as COVID?
Actually, I would be happy if Glenn could explain the questions, because I read it a few times and I was not quite sure what he meant.
Glenn, are you here?
Yes, I'm here. Essentially, in today's world, many students want the diploma rather than the education. And this has been going on for many, many years, that the educational content of a university degree is becoming less and less significant, but having the diploma to get the job is more and more significant. So my question to the Vice Rector essentially is, if we need reforms, where are the reforms going to be needed? Is that towards making an education more suitable for students, or making the certificate more suitable for the employers? What should be more concern for the university at this stage, looking at the employers or the students?
Well, first of all, obviously, we provide a service, and we need to provide to our customers, so to speak, which are the students. Otherwise, they might not come to us. I think that I would say two things. First of all, I think in general, what we need to do at universities, we have a tendency to put most of the emphasis on research as opposed to teaching. And our faculty are promoted mainly on the basis of the research accomplishments, much less so than their teaching accomplishments. And I think this is something that we need to think about and to try to change a bit. This is something I'm struggling with and working on since I got this job, being in charge of teaching. And the second one is that, yes, we need to keep up with time to make the teaching relevant, not just to teach information, to teach skills, soft skills, hard skills, and abilities that that the employment market is looking for. But let me just end with one good, a positive reflection, and that is that when we came back to frontal teaching after a year and a half being on Zoom because of COVID, we were, I think, very positively surprised that vast majority of our students came back to campus in person, even though they had the possibility, they had the option to stay at home because we were forced and compelled by the law to teach hybridly. In other words, to either to broadcast our lectures or at least to record them. 70 to 80% of the students just said, we've had enough of this Zoom business and we just want to sit in class and hear the students and to meet our, hear the professors and to meet our friends, the students. And so all in all, I think people do want to, most of them, I mean, people are different. There's some students prefer it this way, some prefer it another way. But by the way, we never had 100% attendance, much less so, even long before COVID. So some prefer to not to come to class, some prefer to class, some professors compel presence in the classroom, some don't mind if students don't come. So this is nothing new. But all in all, it seems that most of the students do prefer to study on campus physically and not just watching the Zoom screen. So that's on a positive note.
Thank you, Professor Reich. And I have to add that as a teacher myself, I found great value in teaching people face to face. And I think there is a great value in sitting together and you know, making jokes and all this important human communication that doesn't happen in Zoom, which is very artificial. I think we have one question for each. Yes, Olga.
The very important thing which couldn't hear at the Zoom when everybody speaks simultaneously. It's only in the classroom.
Yes, that's true. That's true. That's one point for Zoom. So we have several questions, and I'll try to read them. This is for Ephraim, the first one that I could scroll back. It's also from Glenn. It's a question from Ephraim, and Glenn, if you can also explain it. You say, is the issue of lack of information, data, or failure in analysis because it is inconceivable to imagine that the data gathering is telling us truth, or so we don't want to believe it, so we don't take action? Ephraim, Dr. Lapid?
Dr. Kahana.
Kahana, sorry. Yes, sorry.
There are two Ephraims.
Yeah, that's why.
But it was sent just after
your talk.
Finished his talk. Yeah.
Yes.
So we suppose it's a question to Ephraim Kahana.
For you. Dr. Kahana, you need to unmute yourself.
My question is to Professor Shlomo Shapiro. You talked about the main purpose of the intelligence is the prediction or forecast. I think no one can predict the future. Even the best intelligence officers cannot predict the future. So instead, the intelligence try and do their best to give assessments and even scenarios and the probabilities for the occurrence of the events. The decision makers have to be prepared to the magnitude of the threat instead of the likelihood of this threat. If we are talking about the scenario, even with a very low probability about a war, they should be prepared, like the war of the Yom Kippur War or the Ukraine should have been prepared to a war from Russia. In my view, the Ukraine were not prepared for the war in Russia, and there was the failure. And furthermore, even in the war in Russia, the OSINT, the open source intelligence, had a big role. A lot of information about the movement of the Russian army towards the Ukraine were collected from the satellites and the open sources. This is a comment or and the
it's a comment and a question, and I'll address that in 2 minutes. Nobody can accurately predict the future. I agree with you, but it is the role of intelligence chiefs to do exactly that, to stick their neck out and give very clear predictions, which may be refuted and may be absolutely wrong. But take the example of a specialist doctor. You go to a doctor and he doesn't know the future and he doesn't know you from Adam, but he checks according to all the best diagnosis that he can make. And he says, listen, I think you're going to have cancer in 2 years. So you might, change this and that, take this medication, change your lifestyle or whatever. If not, you will very probably have cancer, or you'll have diabetes, or you'll have something very terrible. Or even the recommendations, look at a box of cigarettes with these terrible pictures and say, cigarettes are deadly. Well, I know people who are 93 and they are smoking and they're very happy with their life. Of course, there are always exceptions to the rules. But we, unfortunately, have grown up, and I say we in plural, in the Western world now, not just Israel, not just the US, in which it is acceptable for intelligence chiefs to say nothing wrapped up beautifully. And they say, well, maybe, but there are no indications that there are some indications that, but on the other side, the indications are like that they indicate the wrong indications. No. Think about what could be saved by giving a proper opinion. And that is what they are paid for. And they are paid very high salaries to stick their neck out and make predictions according to what they have, according to the collection and analysis tools that they have. And if they have a problem, let's say with collection also, they have the tools to address that. But we cannot live in a world in which intelligence loses its main purpose or its main meaning to provide prediction. And let's just think of another example that comes up to my mind. In Israel in the early 2000s, there was a big debate between around 96 to about his death in 2004 about Yasser Arafat. Does Arafat mean to go for peace or for war? Now, Israeli intelligence services had wonderful sources, everything, Human, SIGINT. They read his emails, they listened to his conversations, they bugged his toilets. Everything Arafat did in his headquarters was known. And yet for 8 years, the intelligence services could not provide, until the case of the Karin A ship, which was stopped in the Red Sea, they could not provide a clear answer. Does Arafat intend to go to war or to peace? And so somebody has to stop this downward slide into insignificance. Intelligence services today in Western countries, are very large organizations. The more organizations you have, the more committees, the more discussions, the more debates. Things that used to take 3 weeks before take 3 months now, maybe 3 months now they take. And then you have to have another new technological system which upgrades the old technological system, which in itself upgraded something else before. We have to go back to the tradition of taking responsibility of intelligence, providing forecast. Otherwise, it loses its value.
May I add a small note?
Yes, please.
Okay. I think that subject to the weakness of intelligence services all over the world to predict, there is a trend in the last decades, but especially in the last wars, that the priority moved from prediction and assessment to the very important role of targets. The intelligence is the big feeder of the operation systems, either in the Air Force, in the Navy, in the ground forces, in the different purposes of national security. There are more and more new abilities based on cyber and on AI, artificial intelligence, that were not available in the past, and they, in a sense, replaced the priority of a prediction, which is so tragic week.
Thank you, both Professor Shapiro and Dr. Lapid. Do we have time for one more question for Barry? Following the weaknesses of the Army intelligence education and unconventional, the threats are neither absolute nor sequential. And Glenn asks, wait, this is a very long question.
I think Barry has already answered in the chat.
Okay. Okay, so, okay, that's true.
One more question to Shlomo.
Yes, we have a question for Shlomo. The doomsday clock is still at, doomsday is 100 seconds to midnight from the 20th of January, 2022. The current Russian action hasn't changed it. Are intelligence strategies confused between prediction and forecasting that it won't escalate or spread? And is the Russia-Ukraine war weather model as bad as that of Israel meteorological weather model, because the former it doesn't analyze Putin's state of mind? Professor Shapiro.
And please also ask Barry to refer to this question.
Yes, please, anybody who wants to jump in and contribute.
Very often we hear about nuclear weapons that they are portrayed as weapons of losing a war, weapons of last resort. The Russians see it differently. They think it's weapons of winning war, not of losing war. And they look at the US example. The United States back in 1945 used nuclear weapons not when it was losing the war, but in order to win the war. There was no risk to the continental United States when they used nuclear weapons on Japan. They wanted to win the war faster, more effectively, which they may have done conventionally, of course, with a very bloody invasion of Japan, and paid a very heavy price. The Russians perceive these things differently, and therefore I'm not measuring anything according to doomsday clocks, but we have to understand perceptions. And is there a risk? Of course there's a risk. Can we talk about the unthinkable? I think we must talk about the unthinkable. What will happen if the Russians use tactical nuclear weapons in the Ukraine? Nobody wants to talk about this, because again, we come back to the old paradigm of pre-corona. The worst isn't going to happen. Really bad things aren't going to happen because it's not in our linear way of thinking. And we wake up too late. We woke up too late for corona. We woke up too late for the Ukraine and so on. And I think that the unthinkable, if we learn anything from corona at all, it is to think about the unthinkable, hoping that it won't happen, and taking into account that we may look like fools later. That's a professional risk for intelligence professionals. And certainly junior intelligence officers, for example, in Israel back in 1973, who were warning about war, were looked upon and ridiculed as being fools. Who are they to warn against the great names in military intelligence? But in the end, they turn out to have been right. So at least let's learn some modesty from failures. As Avner points out, we need to think of new models of avoiding such failures and talk about the unthinkable.
Thank you, Professor Shapiro. And I pass the floor to, yes, to Dr. Goldin and Avner.
No, maybe you, Barry,
okay.
would
Barry,
like to
yeah, sure. Yeah. Barry, would you like to, I don't see Barry. So Barry, would you like to add something?
No, I think this has been fun. Let me just tell Avner, congratulations It's a great book that you've done, and I'm actually going to try and see if I can get it adopted for my classes at Georgetown.
And would you like to refer to the what Professor Shapira has talked about, the Ukraine intelligence assessment by the United States or by the West? Can you say something about it?
I'm sorry, what assessment?
Of the intentions by the Russians in the Ukraine crisis. How the US intelligence community have referred to this.
It didn't stop the Russians from invading. So if the idea of releasing this intelligence was to deter the Russians, it didn't do that. What it does appear to have done is to make publicly known the intentions of the Russians. And I think it made the coalition that's opposing the Russians with various kinds of sanctions and other activity, it made that more easy to do.
Thank you, Dr. Sulaouf. Dr. Goldin, please.
Okay, so I would like to thank our dear panelists, Dr. Zulov, Professor Spiro, and Dr. Lapid, and of course, Professor Bronstein for moderating this panel. Thank you so much. It was really exciting. And now I'm so glad and happy to introduce Dr. Barnea, our today's hero. Dr. Barnea teaches business and competitive intelligence in the Department of Information Science at Bar-Ilan University. He is also a research fellow at the National Security Study Center at the University of Haifa in Israel, as well as a lecturer in the School of Business Administration at Netanya Academic College, the Academic College of Tel Aviv-Yafo. He is a former senior member of the Israeli Security Agency. He received a PhD from the University of Haifa. Dr. Barnea is the author of the book, We Did Not Anticipate That, Comparative Analysis of Intelligence Failures in the National Field and the Business Field from 2019. His new book, We Never Expected That, A Comparative Study of Failures in National and Business Intelligence, has been published in 2021, and we are celebrating it now. And it's the first book that is looking at these two different disciplines, trying to compare them and looking at the possibility that each can learn from the other. Dr. Barnea also has published numerous academic papers on business and national intelligence. Aבנר, please,
okay.
בבקשה.
Thank you so much. I would like, by the way, I have corona, so I'm not so well, but still I'm trying my best.
Welcome to the club.
I would like to thank Dr. Olga. I would like to thank Dr. Olga Goldin, who initiated this event, and also to two assistants, Shira and Naomi, and of course to our distinguished speakers who kindly agreed to take part in this event. Your input have given great contribution to this event. And of course, I would like to thank so much to Professor Jenny Bronstein, who agreed to lead this panel. It is also an opportunity for me to appreciate my mentor in writing my PhD thesis, Professor Uri Bar-Joseph, a leading scholar on strategic surprises, for his wonderful support. He couldn't make it today, but I'm still happy to mention his great contribution to developing the ideas that you can read in my book. And now, just a few comments about the book from my own perspective. the discipline of strategic intelligence at government and intelligence in business constitute accepted methods of decision supporting to prevent mistakes and strategic surprises. We know it for quite a long time. Through my research, I discovered that many researchers in the intelligence field feel that intelligence methodology in both contexts has almost reached to a glass ceiling. There is a feeling, I don't want to discuss it now, but there is a feeling that the intelligence has reached to something that it find it difficult to become much better than it is. And I'm not speaking about what Ephraim Lapid mentioned a few minutes ago about operational intelligence. I actually spoke more on strategic intelligence, and rightly, Shlomo Shapira mentioned that it took a few years to understand what are the intentions of Arafat, and we had almost every information that we need, and we still couldn't develop an assessment that was accurate. So, in addition, research has focused separately on national intelligence and on intelligence in business without any attempt to benchmark from one field to the other. Although there are many similarities, people are not aware that how many similarities are between the methodology, the discipline of intelligence for governments and intelligence for huge businesses. In this book, I show that it is possible to use experience gained in the business field to improve intelligence practices in national security and vice versa through mutual learning. And here I have to say something, a comment, which I didn't mention in the book, that I see that the national intelligence, I wouldn't say quite often, but it happens more than what I expected, is not ready to open to other ideas. It is very much in looking internally in order to improve processes and improve capabilities. It does look to outside the world and see what I can learn from there. And this is also very relevant to the issue that we have discussed today, the teaching of intelligence. Teaching of intelligence is so important, not just for the students, it is important for the intelligence organizations themselves in order to get better, more educated, more maybe open-minded people who will work for the government, as it happens with business. So from personal note, I would expect the intelligence organization to be much more open to see what's going outside and outside their own world. I show in this book that it is possible to use experience gained in business field, as I said before, to improve the other one, vice versa, which for me, it was quite a surprise because I also, when I started the research, I thought that, these different fields are so different and there is no anything, there is no any similarities. And the more I got into this research, I saw how similar and how actually each can learn from the other one. The book focused on the comparison between how states, through their intelligence organization, cope with strategic surprises, quite often not very successful, and how business organizations deal with unexpected movement in their markets. Based on this comparison, I have proposed a new model that distinguishes between concentrated and diffuse surprises. Ephraim Kahana spoke about it, and we can speak more about it, but we don't have the time. It's a totally different way of this is a typology of two different So when you see a surprise, substantive surprise, you can easily, with the support of this model, you can decide if it is a concentrated surprise or a diffused surprise. Okay, we spoke about, but just by the way, just recently in May 2020, last year, we had in Israel quite significant riots internally by the Israeli Arabs, the Israeli Arab sector. And this was, it wasn't organized by anyone. It was a major challenge that they took the police, and when the police was unsuccessful, the ISA got into it to understand what's going on and to stop it, because it was diffused mainly by the social media. So it was a surprise. And what kind of surprise? It was a diffused surprise. And how it was diffused by rumors, by social media, and it took quite a long time to the government to stop it. So it's not something in the past, in the first Intifada or the second Intifada, it was just here a year ago. And we don't like to, if you ask, I spoke with students about it last week, and they said to me, wow, this event of May 2021 was a long time ago. I said, yes, it looks like a long time ago, but it was last year, okay? Because we don't like to refer to events which are not, which we are not pleasant, and we don't like to remember them. But I, as a scholar of intelligence and counterintelligence, I'm going to write about it quite soon. Now, back to the book, the basic premise of this book is that in both fields, national and business, intelligence gathering and analysis about adversaries and competitors regarding changes and threats in the external environment support the decision process. Decision makers need to have good intelligence. Okay, and I agree very much with Shlomo Shapiro about the prediction. This is one of the areas that I focused on, and I had students in the information science department in Bar-Ilan who last week finished a work, a paper about one of a big, well-known Israeli high-tech company, and they were asked to evaluate the situation of this corporation and ask what is going to happen to them in the near future. And they found many, and all come from open source. They found very interesting information and analysis that raise a question: is this corporation will be able to succeed in the future if they are not going to make major differences? And it is here about prediction. So the company need to read this paper and to rethink about what they are doing. And here is prediction. If you're not going to do something unpleasant can happen to you. I really hope that this book will be used by scholars and students and practitioners in both fields, and thus will make the growing intelligence discipline more valuable for further research and learning, and to the decision makers, so that they will be better informed by better intelligence. We have to teach our students how to analyze, how to deliver intelligence information for the decision makers, because they are asking for good intelligence. They prefer and it's both in business and in government, they prefer to take decisions based on good intelligence, and quite often they don't get it. It's not that they always get highly quality intelligence. Sometimes, and especially when you make research on case studies of the past, you see the decision makers actually didn't get the right information, the right intelligence. So when they make decision wrong, it wasn't just because of their point of view, but because they were not supported by the intelligence. So thank you all for attending this event. And it was a real pleasure to meet all of you. And I would like to wish you a nice weekend. Thank you so much. Olga, it's yours. Thank you.
Dr. Golden, you're on mute.
Okay, yes, I just was fighting with my mouse, my microphone icon. Okay. Thank you so much, Dr. Barnea. It was a really exciting evening, and I think that we raised so many different aspects and raised so many questions, and it will be very exciting, and also it will be challenging to try to find the answers. And before we move to informal part of our evening, I would like to say two things. First of all, once again, thank you. Thank you, Professor Aryeh Wright. Thank you, Dr. Ephraim Kahana. Thank you, Dr. Barry Zulaf from Boston, from cold and snowy Boston, with this excellent Lions family on background. Thank you, Professor Shlomo Spiro and Dr. Ephraim Latif, and of course, Professor Jenny Bronstein, and my excellent colleagues, Shira Kessler-Cohen, for all your logistics and operational work for preparing to this event, and Naomi Avraham, you are always here and there and everywhere, so thank you so much. And I would also like to tell you that we will have on the week of 24th of March, a very interesting event. It will be the first in Israel Open Access Week. It will be devoted to open access science, open access publishing, and so on. So we will have a lot of lectures, and now Naomi put the link to our event registration, and it will be also not only lectures, but some kind of activities like escape room and more, with some significant prizes. So all of you are inviting, and I would like also to now to invite you to open your mics. And as in a real salon, we will stay here till the last guest will decide to leave. And if you want, you may ask another question or change your expressions or so on. So thank you for all of you for joining us today's evening. Thank you, Dr. Barnea, for your excellent book.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Olga, for initiating, and to everyone. Have a nice weekend. See you soon. Bye-bye.
רפואה שלמה. ספידי
תודה.
אבנר.
Good luck and good health.
תודה. תודה, חברים.
One good evening. Thanks, Aבנר. Thanks, Olga and Shira and everybody. Thank you, and all the speakers. Feel better.
Thank you, Aבנר. I hope you feel better soon.
Thanks.
You're awesome.
Thank you, Elaine. Thank you.
Thank you again.
Thank you, Barry.
Thank you, Barry.